This is Outside the Box. Standing by to join me is Mimi Chen of FM Rock Radio. And she also does a whole bunch of other things like acting and singing and dancing. And I remember the first time I heard her on the radio and I thought, who is this cool woman? And then when I ended up at the Sound LA as a board operator, not on air, unfortunately, I had a chance to really get to know her on air persona. So I'm so excited to have her on the show. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Janine. What a nice workup.
It's true, though.
I'm just so sorry that we didn't get to hang out much at the Sound because, you know, that was one of my favorite radio stations. The people there were all universally nice.
Oh, I know.
And as a matter of fact, I do know that the guy who does the hiring, Dave Beasing, even told me specifically that when he talked to people who are applying for gigs, which probably included you, that he wanted to make sure that they were nice. And it's such cool. Really, you know, because
yeah, I know, because who wants to work with people that aren't nice? And it really was a great group of people.
Exactly. So, you know,
yeah.
And we were all, people don't understand, you know, radio is a 24-hour operation. So very often work with people and never, ever get to see them.
And I worked a late shift. I would come in later in the day. And then at one point I'd be in the office all by myself running the board. But the view out of that studio, wow.
One of the best radio studios ever.
Yes. Gorgeous.
Still miss it.
I know. And then because how long were you there for?
Almost 10 years. Isn't that crazy? And
yes.
And I was part-time, but that was fine because, you know, I do like to act, mm-hmm. and I have like 3 agents right now.
Wow. So, for commercials, theatrical, and voiceover?
Yeah.
How did I know that?
And it's really sad because I think if I was their only client, they would all probably go to the poorhouse.
Oh. It's so competitive. People think it's so glamorous when you say, I'm a voice actor and I also have a commercial agent. And, you know, it's very hard to get the work.
It is. Even, you know, even with a great agent, mm-hmm. the only thing they can do is submit you to casting directors. And that's the first step. If you can't get past the casting person, you know, they look at your headshot. They go, nah, I don't want that person to come in. And you don't get the audition even on that. And then you get in the first audition where they screen people, and sometimes they're just literally looking at you. They don't even hear what you're saying. And then they only pick like a certain amount of actors to come back for the callback. So if you get on the first round, it's like, okay.
Yes. And even the callback, you get your hopes up and, you know.
And nowadays, callbacks, they're calling back like, you know, 50 people. So it's like, well, okay, my chances of getting that are really bad.
Exactly. The probability. It's so interesting because I remember, you know, when I first moved to California in 2000, I had my physical CD, my demo in hand because I came from Boston. And now in the pandemic, I decided to get Source Connect. So I don't know if you have that, but it seems like that's what people need to have, is that ability to record from home for clients. And thank goodness there's that technology.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I live near the beach where the internet is really, really bad. I can do Source Connect, but internet here is so poor that, you know, it was like I just gave up, and I just tell people I'll go to the radio station to.
Exactly.
But
yeah. I know, I hear you, because it's a challenge. I had to do, you know, like the Ethernet cable and then make sure this and that. And then one day I remember the power went out. And I'd rather go in. I'd rather be directed in person. Wouldn't you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's just something about being there, you know. I love that energy.
How did you end up in radio? Because you're from the East Coast, right? New Jersey?
And in Jersey, I was raised the typical kind of Asian upbringing where, you know, you're encouraged to study hard And my mom was a singer, and she knew in China that there was a school called Juilliard. So she wanted us all to train there. And I was lucky because I got into their pre-college division program, which now has become a lot harder to get
Very
into.
competitive. Yeah.
But in those days, it was a lot easier because I studied with a piano teacher who was kind of affiliated with the school, and from that you tend to get in easier. And so I grew up thinking more of, okay, I want to be in music somewhere, and not necessarily as a pianist. Usually when people train at Juilliard, the pipeline is either you're a star or you're not. And I was not a star. So the pipeline for that would be like to teach. So I was like, okay, teach people how to play piano. And then when I went to college, one of my friends, a boy who I guess really liked, he's like going, let's do the radio station. And I'm like, what do you mean? There's a radio station? And he goes, yeah, there's a radio station on campus. So he dragged me over there, and I thought, how fascinating, people can do radio. And there were signals that the station had, that the university had. One was what they called the low power AM, which kind of on campus. The other one was an FM signal, which was really huge. It was 50,000 watts. It got all of New Jersey. And so I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. I will try. So I did a few shows in the AM. And then he says, well, in order to get in the FM side, you have to get the FCC license at that time. So I said, okay, I'll do it. But I wasn't all that, you know.
You weren't that into it?
Well, it wasn't like I was, you know, passionate at that time. I just thought, oh, okay, this will be a fun hobby, right?
What school, by the way? Where was this school?
It was Princeton.
Oh.
I did the normal.
You're so low key. Oh, I went to Juilliard. Oh, I went to Princeton.
I think Juilliard helped me get into Princeton.
You are so low key. Okay, continue. Sorry.
I was not a star at Princeton. I kind of like eked my way through. So, so on the train going into New York City to take the FCC license test, I kind of like looked at the book. I mean, here I was with this boy
cramming.
Like, he studied like for the whole frickin' week, and I was sitting there on the train just flipping through. And so when I took the test, it was like all Greek to me. I'm like mathematical formulas and, you know, things about, you know,
connect don'ts and
electricity, things that I had no clue.
How comforting to know you were running a station.
And it was sort of like the eeny, meeny, miny, moes. So I just went, okay, this answer looks good. This answer looks good.
That is so funny.
So at the end of the test, you know, we're waiting our results, and I'm like going, yeah, I probably flunked. And then I passed and he failed.
No.
Did they mix our test up or something? And I'm like going, oh my God, I passed.
And does he know how much effort you put into it?
I didn't want to rub it in.
Don't tell him to this day. We won't let him watch this.
Yeah, he was a nice guy. I just felt bad for him because he was the one who really wanted to pass.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, wow, I guess I can do an FM show.
Mm-hmm.
The beginnings of my radio career. And then how I broke in was in Princeton, there was another radio station called WPST, Trenton, which was kind of a top 40 radio station. And they had their transmitter in Trenton, but the studio was in Princeton. And one of the DJs there called me up and he goes, well, I kind of like the FM, but what we're doing here is very up tempo and you know, I need to like figure out how to be more laid back like you. And I'm like going, oh, he's the professional calling me up. Although maybe it was because he was trying to hit on me. I don't know. at that point were like really super young. Like we're all the same age.
Okay. Like what, 20?
Yeah,
19? Okay.
I think he's 20 and I was 18. And
Mm-hmm.
so we were hanging out and he was teaching me how to apply. And it was mainly just recording, a dummy show
Yeah.
where you took out all the music and you just had all the talk. So he helped me make a demo tape.
Great.
And I used that tape. I applied at the station he was working in. And at that point, there were barely any women on the air. So the guy's like going, okay, we're talking like, the year 79. Yeah, I'm old. But anyway, he's like going, okay, let's get some women on the air. So he hired me. And I'm like going, woohoo, I'm like a pro DJ.
Yes.
And so there was, but the station that I really loved was a station called WMMR, and that was the FM rock radio station that was kind of super cool, laid back, and they were kind of free form, playing whatever they wanted. And then I thought, why not just send a tape to them? So I did.
Why not?
Called. And then the guy like said, let's meet. And I was like, oh my gosh, WMMR.
New Jersey or Long Island, or where was it?
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. Whoa.
Yeah. So I went to Philly, which was actually a 2-hour drive from Princeton. So it was, not close, but
Yes.
with a car you can get anywhere. And I had a car. It was one of the few privileged kids on campus with a car. It's because my parents like lived close to Princeton. So to encourage me to go home, they gave me the car, and so I could drive home every weekend and do my laundry and visit my dog.
Did you do that every weekend?
Pretty much.
Pretty much?
I wasn't a good kid hanging out with my parents so much. I now like regret, because it's like, when you're a kid, you think you're invincible and that you'll be young.
And you don't want to hang out with your parents, let's face it, at 18, 19. Very much. Yeah.
Just got so focused on hanging out with your friends. So
exactly. What were they thinking though? You go from Juilliard to Princeton to, I'm going to be a DJ.
After a few jobs, my parents gave up. But in the beginning, my mom would like go, well, are you going to go back to school, maybe become a lawyer? Because that's what I always threatened too. It was like, maybe I should apply to law school and become a lawyer. Because, Asians, that's what Asians do. We aim our kids toward professional kind of occupations. But I was having so much fun being a DJ. It was like, maybe, in about 5 years, well, the 5 years extended to 10 years. And then after 10 years, you kind of go, God, I'll be too old to really, hang out in the law school. All the young people will sneer at me. So at that point, I was too far gone. And that's really the sad part of it all.
Well, it's so exciting because tell me some of the people that you've gotten to meet. I mean, when you're first starting out, were you awestruck at some of the people you got to meet in the music industry?
When you're that age, and, I was hanging out with a lot of really famous musicians in Juilliard.
Mm-hmm.
And like, when I was so young, because my older brothers and my sister all went to Juilliard before me, and there I was like playing patty cake at the age of 5 with like Pinchas Zuckerman and like all the Isaac Stern kind of famous violinist types.
Mm-hmm.
So these were names that were revered in the classical music field. People would come up to them and, maestro, blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, oh, okay. So going to the radio station, in the early days, I mean, we're talking the early days of a lot of brand new artists, Talking Heads, Blondie, Van Halen, and they're still building their audience. So it was like, to me, it was just fun. I would talk to some of these artists. I talked to Blondie, and she immediately ran into the office and said, "How old is she? She looks like she's 13 years old."
That is
And
so funny.
Van Halen. And I remember they were so cute when they came in. They all like were like happy they were in a radio station, and they would like
Van
see
Halen?
Van Halen, the whole four at that point, and they ran in, and it was a large studio that WMMR had, so you could literally like put a whole rock band in there, and it was still one of the largest radio station studios you would ever visit, although I think they've moved from where they were in Rittenhouse Square. But they stood in front of the microphone and they would yell, "Hi, we're Van Halen." Almost every
All of them, or just David Lee Roth?
No, all of them. And then it was like almost every single question I asked them, they would start out with, "Hi, we're Van Halen." It was horrible. And then, a few years later, I went to visit them backstage at a concert, and they turned into rock stars. It was sad. It was like,
Really?
"Who are you?" Oh yeah, you interviewed us, but I don't remember. Because by that time, they'd been interviewed by hundreds and hundreds of radio stations.
Right.
So.
Well, and also partying, probably.
Yeah,
Slightly. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was the era when radio and record companies were very close.
Mm-hmm.
I was working at what they call the cutting edge radio station, radio stations that introduced new artists, as opposed to say top 40, which was more like, okay, these artists are already pretty well known. So
right.
When you introduce brand new artists, it's their first records. This is exciting times. Some of them made it, some of them didn't make it. I friended a band called Nectar. Of course, they didn't make it, but I loved them. They were a progressive rock band, kind of like in the vein of Moody Blues.
Nice.
And it was also another progressive rock band called Renaissance. I got to have dinner with them. They were lovely people. And they were well known in the East Coast. The East Coast radio stations somehow loved these more classically oriented bands, and they didn't make it in the West Coast, obviously.
Yeah.
And I remember having a limo ride with Tom Petty.
Oh, wow.
I know. I sat next to Tom Petty.
Oh. How old were you? Were you in your 20s?
Well, by that time I was probably 19.
Oh,
and
old.
And there was another DJ called Stephen Clean who worked at WMMR with me.
Mm-hmm.
He was attributed to being the one to really help break Tom Petty. So when Tom signed the records for us, he just signed Tom Petty, on the record for me, to Mimi. And then for Stephen's record, he signed, "Stephen, thanks for all the checks." And I thought, wow, that was really nice. How cool.
Exactly.
I wonder if Stephen still has that record.
That's funny.
Something. Well, anyway.
I wanted to ask you, because I told you another time we were talking how growing up in Manhattan, I remember I would listen to the radio like WPLJ or I think it was WBAB out of Long Island. And to me, the DJs were like rock stars. I wanted to call up. Sometimes I did. And did you have that kind of excitement growing up?
I was excited because I did the same thing as you. I think I called up Tony Pigg.
Tony Pigg, yeah.
And I remember
at St. John.
I know, I'm like going, "Oh, I'm talking to Tony Pigg," and he was so nice.
Yes. The deep voices, and I just, yeah. That
was the era of deep voices. Now you get kind of dweeby sounding guys on the air.
Or it's all automated.
Yeah, a lot of pre-programmed.
Yeah.
Pre-recorded stuff. People don't realize how much stuff is pre-recorded, and that's sad.
Yes.
To me, the excitement of radio is live radio. It's like you open the mouth and there you are.
I agree.
God's ear.
I mean, I remember going into the sound and meeting Cynthia Fox.
Oh,
being awestruck. And then, other people were just so nice. Rita,
Oh, Rita's the best.
Rita's the best.
Yeah.
And the other person I met, and for some reason I'm blanking on her name, but she does a podcast now. Julie
Julie.
Taylor. Oh, so kind, so nice.
I'm back to working with Julie. She's now middays at KCSN. So, it's a great thing. Go back and work with some of the people, both Andy Chanley and Julie and I, former sound people.
Great.
And so, yeah, radio it's always a fun thing to work at the more cutting edge station where, producing new artists. So,
definitely. Yeah.
I would meet people and they just think I'm just a DJ. So that was fun. The only time where I met somebody who treated me like, oh my God, this is Mimi Chen. I was at a party and I was just kind of hanging out. By that time I'd left WMMR. And this girl came up to me and we were talking and I was like, oh, hi, I'm Mimi Chen. And she goes, wait, there was a Mimi Chen who was on the radio in Philadelphia at WMMR. I said, oh yeah, that was me. And she's like going, oh my gosh, you're Mimi Chen. And I'm like, yeah. And she was so cute. Like
adorable.
Like a rock star. And she kind of like crept around the whole party. I could see her staring at me and, like hovering near me. It was like adorable.
So cute.
Yeah.
Because like, what do you tell people who want to get into radio? It's so different. I remember thinking, oh, if I get into the sound, maybe they'll let me on air, and then ending up at your other affiliate station of 88.5, which was the jazz station, and then I was on air. But it's so hard to get these live gigs, right?
I think the problem is that at some point, because back in the day, you remember radio really only had its start like in the 50s and 60s, and there were very, very few radio stations in the 50s and 60s, and they were all limited to like, top 40. Right. And they were all dominated by men with these deep radio voices. Then the 70s came and more stations came, and the 80s came, and then suddenly, people were buying radio properties left and right. The whole radio thing kind of exploded in the 80s. So you had, by that time, more real people as opposed to the 60s and 70s kind of DJs with the deep, heavy voices, more real people coming into the scene. So there's more people, more talent out there in the 80s. And,
maybe because of MTV too, because they were doing, videos and
of course, young people always love music, and they're always flocking to the occupations where they're associated with music. And that's probably the same with radio. And that's why the field is now extremely full of radio DJs and people who've worked radio, and now with the internet and internet radio stations, people are putting up more radio stations, becoming DJs, even though they might have, an audience of 5 people. But it's, it's just an explosion. So the regular radio scene, I think, is much harder than when I was breaking in, and there were very few women. So, being one of the few women in the area with experience, I think that's also helped me, because it was like, oh, she's experienced, we'll hire her.
Yeah. And you've been, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was also going to say the big problem with radio is it's still male dominated in the attitudes toward women.
That's unfortunate after all this time. Yeah. But I wanted to ask you about Peace, Love, and Sunday Mornings, because you did that show for a long time. How did that come up? How did that start?
Well, I was hired by a couple guys who knew I'd been around the block, and so I was, of course, very familiar with music of the Peace, Love generation. And they wanted to have a show on Sunday mornings. And initially it was actually a very cutting edge kind of show because the sound had several iterations. First of all, they were this weird conglomeration of brand new music and classic rock. Then they discovered the ratings were poor and decided to drop all the brand new music and just go classic rock. And that's fine. But then, the music director at that point told me, she goes, well, since you're a specialty show, you're the only show where I can, showcase new music. And I said, oh, fine. I'm good with that. I still love new music. Well, at some point, the ratings showed that people, because nowadays the ratings are so specific, they know, like who is listening to what songs, like what songs bring more, generate more interest.
Yeah.
And it was not the new songs. It was all the old songs. So at some point,
Interesting.
Even during my show, it was like, let's just, focus more on catalog. And catalog has many different definitions. In today's research with music, it's 18 months or older. But to me, it's like, wow, it takes a couple years for people to feel like it's an old piece of music. So, and nowadays, you'll have people who listen to like something that's been around 20 years and they think it's new music. So it's like, oh.
That's crazy.
Well, the whole music industry has become really sad. And I feel really sad for musicians nowadays. I mean,
because they lose their rights to their music.
Well, that's only if they sign a bad contract. And
so why do you feel sad?
Well, because nowadays with the internet and, MySpace and now the explosion of social media, TikTok, everybody, of course, wants to be somebody in music. Well, that, so with Spotify, the uploading of music is like, it was used to be 40,000 a day. Now it's 60,000 new songs a day. You cannot possibly live a lifetime and listen to even just a fraction of this new music.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Spotify claims that, they'll introduce new music, but I think there's a lot of, cherry picking going on there because it is impossible to listen to all of that stuff.
Right. So how do you make a name for yourself if you're an artist? I guess getting on TikTok and being on Instagram, and there's a lot of social media promotion.
Well, to me, it's like a bad and good thing. The bad, like the competition is really hideous as what it used to be. I mean, it was bad before, but artists, in order to get discovered, would have to go through the whole, send a demo to a record company and hope and pray that an A&R person wants to listen to you live. Yeah. Now it's okay. Well, every kid in their basement is throwing out music, and so the proof of who wants to listen to it is out there on the internet. So they have all the tools to market their music. And it will require money. So I'm seeing a lot of people with the money who can, market their music have the advantage. Because, to me, getting to an audience is getting to the right audience for your music. And it doesn't necessarily mean your circle of friends and family.
Right.
So get out there.
Yeah.
I remember back in the day, there was this really crazy artist. Her name was Diamanda Galas. And somebody sent me one of her records. And it was literally like demons screaming. I was like, it's the scariest music I'd ever heard. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And she got a record deal. But then she resided and performed in New York City. And New York City is such a huge, huge market that she was able to develop a following and get the record deal. And that's why, it was like she found an audience.
Sure.
And when you record, you and there's some record label marketing, you can get some even bigger audience. So,
Right.
she
Yeah.
was able to find an audience. And that's the problem with most young artists now, is being able to get there out there in the internet, but find an audience for whatever you're producing. It has to be something that people want to listen to,
Sure.
because people will send me stuff and I'm like going, okay, it's fine.
Yes.
It might even be good, but it doesn't do anything for me emotionally. It's like
Yes.
it doesn't, the slickness of the production is, can just even leave you just like, because we're all barraged, right?
I know.
We're every day,
Yeah.
wherever you go, there's music and you're inundated with,
I agree.
and
It's
we're all
it's
dated.
it's interesting though, because I was a DJ for a few years at KUCI and then I switched to talk show, but people would send me stuff and you could kind of tell in the first few seconds,
Mm.
if something grabs you or not.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's why I tell people, it's like, if you're going to send a demo tape, it has to be no more than 3 songs.
Mhm.
And even nowadays, it's like, gosh, who has time to listen to 3 songs? I'm one of the few who will listen to 3 songs, but some of these industry pros, it's like 1 song. And if it
10 seconds and then back to the next one, 10 seconds. And yeah, you're
if
right.
the first one they're listening to, they're not going to listen to the next 2.
Yes.
So, and the only time is like, I sometimes do independent A&R, and I heard this young artist who really is poorly recorded, but I'm like going, so I introduced her to a fairly well-known producer, and now I think they're going to work together on stuff. So I'm kind of hoping something comes of that.
Great. That was very nice of you.
Yeah. Well, I sometimes will hear something that I think deserves a wider audience, and
You hear the potential.
I still have a few friends left in the record business, even though it's an industry that's really scrambling for life at this point.
Right.
You know?
And you're still doing singing gigs?
Singing, and well, nowadays a lot of my singing is limited to karaoke. I mean, I used to have a band back in the day, and the kids came and I still had a band, and then at some point it just got to be really hard, and
Yeah.
and then now it's like, especially the pandemic, I just kind of stopped singing. Well, actually before the pandemic, I got diagnosed with breast cancer, and
I remember
and
that.
everything stopped, because your whole goal is, okay, I'm going to get rid of this,
Right.
and
Yeah.
get the cancer out of my system. And I was one of the lucky ones, but in the interim, you're like 1.5 years go by and you suddenly realize that I haven't sung in 1.5 years, and that you kind of get like, rusty.
That's
I don't-
okay. What was that?
It's horrifying.
Oh, it's fine. You were very open too about cancer. I remember seeing your posts on Facebook, and I think at one point you had a blue wig and
Oh yeah, the wigs. At some point it was like, well, if I'm gonna have to wear wigs, it would either wear wigs or walk around with the bald look, which was fine, but I didn't want people to be like, I didn't want to be too obvious. I never told my parents, because that
you
would
didn't?
because that would just scare them and make them unhappy, and so
Right.
shockingly enough, I bought some fake, horrible, cheap wigs, but the weird part is that I would look at these wigs and go, God, it's obviously fake. But my parents, being older and probably the eyesight not very good,
Yes.
they didn't ask. They didn't say a word. They just thought it was me.
You mean even with a blue wig, they just thought it was your hair?
I just wore a regular black
Oh,
wig.
regular one. Okay. Yeah.
they just thought it's, oh, okay, it's her hair,
Yeah.
maybe a different haircut or something. But
Right.
no. And then but the blue wig, the purple, the pink, those are my favorites, because, well, hey, I figured since dyeing black hair is really, really insane, you have to bleach it
It's
out.
white and yeah.
Yeah, and then
No, it's a good choice.
so I was like, well, I'll have fun with this. And then, of course, my husband's like, well, you're having way too much fun with the. I'm like, if I'm going to have fun during this cancer day, it's like, I'm going to have some fun with the wigs.
You're going to do whatever makes you happy while you're going through this. Yeah. And if a wig is, which is so small and make you happy, then go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was one of the few joys. It was like, okay, if I'm going to have to wear a wig, I'll wear silly wigs.
Why not? Absolutely. Now, are you involved? Do you have a tech company, I thought, for a while there, or a research company? Yeah.
Yeah. Back in 2007, my husband showed me some work that he did in artificial intelligence, conversational AI. And I thought, wow, this is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So we made a go of it, and it was called Cognitive Code.
I remember that.
And we tried hard. We got funding, but during the pandemic, everything kind of shut down. The investor kind of got hit hard by the pandemic and had to funding us, and so we had to shutter our doors. I think they're still trying to operate somewhere because the technology is still good.
Good.
I still think that Sylvia works better than Alexa and Siri. So, hopefully they can really monetize it. But one of the biggest problems of being in that field is that every single big company also already had their own initiative. You go to Google Voice, you go to Apple, there's Siri, Amazon, Alexa. So, there was very little interest except trying to figure out what we were doing. And, and it's sad because I think that our technology, Sylvia, is still better than any of those. That's just my opinion.
Well, that's good. I mean,
I know it sounds like fighting words.
Yeah, it does. But, maybe something will happen with it now. I mean, you never know.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe, if some company wants to grab it and do something huge with it, I won't complain. I still have some stock in that company, and
good.
I can only wish them luck.
So tell the listeners what days you're on 88.5.
Well, I am down to one show, which is Sunday afternoons, 1 to 3, and it's Love and Sundays. It's a lot of fun. Working at a non-commercial station like KCSN is very challenging because, as you know, our funding comes directly from listener donations. So It's not like working at a big commercial FM like The Sound, where we had a sales staff, can get lots of sponsorships and commercials to pay for all the bills. Now the bills are paid from, just pleading and people. Send somebody.
Fun drive.
Yeah, it's not fun. That's the one part I hate about working at a non-com radio station, is like, please send money.
I know. But do you guys still have bands? Do you have any live bands that come in and play?
Yeah, they do. They well, before the pandemic, they always had like a live band come in once or twice a week, new music, new artists, young artists, and they're still trying to make, as far as the mission statement for the station is going, is still to support new independent artists coming out. And it's a big deal for, in music, because we're one of the few stations actively doing that. And that's actually also a brave thing, because the ratings continuously show that what people want to listen to is stuff they already know, old music, and they they don't really want to listen to brand new music. So if you're a music lover and you listen to KCSN during the week, it gets a little challenging. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that they play that I even sit there and go, why?
Why are you playing this?
Or that's there's some good gems. I like some of the stuff they find, but some of it is like, and I think music has gotten to the point too where it's like there's not much left to discover in terms of types of music. We've kind of gone through every genre that there is.
True.
So,
but it'd be interesting. I don't know if you guys do this, is when you do have bands come in or artists that people really like if they come in and make a donation that could go towards the station.
Well, yes and no. I mean,
can't?
Most bands don't really make a donation. Most of them just come in and look at.
No, I meant the listeners.
Oh, the listeners. Yeah, maybe the listeners will.
The listeners, they come in, this is like an exclusive event, and they come in and they donate to the station because look what you're providing,
Yeah.
And
yes.
can sell their merch.
I mean, we do have ways for people to get station swags, and they donate and they get like, a t-shirt or a hat. And there are exclusive members only events where people like, donate a regular stream, $10 a month, and they can, keep the station afloat.
Pay the electric bill. Yeah. No, I hear you.
We're always hunting for new donors because sometimes people, they stop their donations. So it's not a steady thing.
Right. I know it's very challenging, but I mean, you love what you do. And I know the other DJs are talented and passionate too. So
yeah, they're all really great people.
Yeah. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, I have Facebook pages. I have the DJ Mimi Chen on Facebook. I have Twitter, which is Mimi_the sound. And that's a verified account. Woo!
All right.
And TikTok, which is where you and I met.
Yes. I love your posts on TikTok. They're really interesting. Yeah.
And that's DJ Mimi Me.
Me.
Yeah. MIMI.
You look like you're having a good time when you do them.
I do. I originally I started out because I have a lot of family members in music, and I sort of like, instead of Aunt Mimi trying to like, shove things in people's faces when I see them, it's like, well, if they learn something from Aunt Mimi or today or next week, who knows? I don't even if any of them watch it or pay attention. It's just become a little hobby of mine now.
I like it. It's really interesting. And you're really great because you give people a shout out too.
Oh, okay.
People like that.
That's true.
Well, I've really enjoyed this. I want to thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, well, thank you, Janine. It was fun.
Maybe I'll come stop in and say hi at the station sometime.
Absolutely.
I'd love that. All right. Thank you.
All right. Take care.